Hi everyone, Susan Storm here. I'm the founder of psychologyjunkie.com and a certified MBTI practitioner. And today I want to get into the INFJ personality type and how they respond to stress. We're going to look at what creates stress for INFJs, what they look like when they're not stressed, what a grip stress response is, and how INFJs can reach a state of equilibrium. So let's start by looking at what INFJs are like when they're not in a state of stress. INFJs on their own are very calm, gentle people. They are very forward focused. They tend to take a lot of time to imagine how things are likely to go in the future. They're very visionary. They like to anticipate future outcomes and imagine incredible ideas for the future. They are idealists, which means they often have an idea of how they want the world to be improved for people or for a cause that matters to them. And they're willing to put in a lot of effort and time into making that ideal or vision come to fruition. They tend to be highly empathic. They easily pick up on and absorb other people's feelings, sometimes confusing them with their own. They're also very insightful. They tend to look beyond the obvious to try to gauge patterns that are going on in people, in relationships, in culture, and society. They're also quick to cut past distractions to find the essential meaning of things. They're ultimately interested in what things mean, the why behind everything. They're not as interested in the details as they are in the big picture. So if you are spending time with an INFJ and they're not in a state of stress, you'll probably notice that they are a good listener, that they're very insightful, that they have an interest in ideas and theories and possibilities more than in what's just happening in the here and now. You'll notice that they're empathetic and they're good at understanding people's emotions and perspectives from many different walks of life. And you'll notice that they like to have a fairly organized, clear-cut direction for their life. They like having a plan. They like making a plan. Another quality about INFJs is they're very independent. They like to find their own creative way to accomplish tasks, and they absolutely hate to be micromanaged or be forced to follow a routine, traditional method. They like to think outside the box and find new ways to do things, new and structured ways. They aren't just people who experiment with one idea and the next. They usually spend a lot of time creating a strategy or vision for what they want to create or how they want to accomplish something or the world they want to make a reality. And then they come up with a very detailed strategy for achieving that goal or that dream. When it comes to their work life, it's like a fairly flexible schedule where they can have a lot of control over their tasks and where they can get them accomplished in their own creative way. They like to have as much autonomy as possible, and they need a lot of clarity in their role and their responsibilities. They don't like anything that's really chaotic. They want to know exactly what's expected of them and when it needs to be delivered. But then they like the freedom to accomplish that in their own way. They do prefer a fairly organized, structured environment and coworkers who communicate directly and honestly. And this goes for relationships as well. This doesn't just apply to work. In relationships, INFJs also like to know exactly where they stand with people. They need a lot of authenticity in their relationships. They don't like a lot of secrecy or mixed messages at all. They like to know exactly where they stand, what the focus of the relationship is, where it's going. So now let's look at some things that create stress for INFJs. Number one, dealing with details. Before I really get too deep into this, let me go ahead and lay the foundation for understanding how the INFJ mind works. INFJs have two cognitive functions that we're going to focus on today. Their dominant function, which is called introverted intuition, and their inferior function, which is called extroverted sensing. Introverted intuition is all about seeing the bigger picture, looking for patterns, meanings, and insights. It's more interested in what's going on behind the scenes than what is on the surface. It's what makes INFJs really forward thinking. It's what gives them insights into future realities, and it can also give them insight into people. They're more interested in concepts and ideas and meanings than they are in details, facts, and surface level realities. The inferior function of the INFJ is called extroverted sensing. This function is really in many ways the antithesis of introverted intuition. This function is all about understanding the details around you, reacting to life as it happens, being spontaneous and flexible, living in the moment, having as much fun and enjoyment as you can with the opportunities available to you right now. So with your dominant function, you have a lot of energy for this function. In fact, when you are tapped into your dominant function, you tend to get more energy. Like you could have been tired, but now that you are, as an INFJ, coming up with some cool insights about the future or dreaming up a possibility, you feel yourself getting more and more amped up and excited. The dominant function doesn't feel difficult to use. It doesn't feel challenging. It doesn't feel draining. In contrast, the inferior function, while you admire it, it takes a lot more energy to use. It takes a lot more work. It feels a lot more draining. You feel less confident when you're using this, less certain about what you're doing. I've spoken to many INFJs and INTJs who feel a little bit stupid, for lack of a better word, when they're having to use extroverted sensing, when they have to stay totally focused in on the moment and the details around them in that moment. Your ability to tolerate your inferior function and having to use it is usually shorter. You're going to wear out faster. It's still valuable. It's still something that you need to have a good relationship with, but it also can wear you out really quickly, and it can make you feel really insecure or even vulnerable when you're using it. It feels like I've got something in my eye. All people, regardless of their personality type, tend to think that their dominant function is the right tool for all the jobs. And in contrast, they tend to push the inferior function aside, thinking, I'll get to that some other time when I'm not under pressure, I don't have anything better to do, or no one's watching. And so many INFJs have a kind of an imbalance towards introverted intuition and a more dismissive attitude towards extroverted sensing. So now that we've laid the foundation for what's going on in the INFJ's brain, let's look again at those things that create stress for INFJs. Number one, dealing with a lot of sensory details. Because INFJs are idea people, they're imagination people, they're big picture people, having to deal with minute details can make them feel extremely stressed very quickly. Because when they have to deal with details, they are forced to rely on their inferior function, because extroverted sensing is all about the details, the facts, the concrete, tangible realities of life. And so when INFJs are tapped into that, they're having to rely on their inferior function, which of course has a shorter fuse. It feels less confident, less certain, it feels less energizing, it feels more tiring, it takes a lot more effort to use. This is especially true if they have to deal with details in an unfamiliar environment. So imagine you have an INFJ who is trying to drive in a new city like Atlanta, like a really busy city with a lot of fast-moving cars. And they have to try to find their way to a specific location, and maybe their GPS isn't working, so they're having to rely on someone telling them what to do from a map. This would be peak stress for an INFJ because not only are they having to really hyper focus on the details, but they're having to do it in a place where they are not familiar with what's around them. They haven't created any muscle memory for this location. Dealing with sensory stimulation can also be extremely stressful for INFJs. Lots of noise, bright lights, even textures can be overwhelming for them. Because extroverted sensing is their inferior function, they tend to need things to be very sensory gentle for them. That means soothing, dimmer lights, quiet atmosphere, clothes that feel soft and smooth on their skin. They don't want to become conscious of their senses to a very strong degree. When they go into a restaurant and there's a lot of blaring music and there's really bright lights and there's a lot of people talking, it forces them to be hyper conscious of their senses and the sensory details around them, which again push them into a state of stress. And so often INFJs identify as highly sensitive people because they really don't like to have to handle a lot of really striking, intense sensory stimulation. Interruptions are another big stressor for INFJs. When they do something, they tend to put all their energy and focus on it. They're not necessarily great multitaskers. They like to focus on one thing at a time and really tune out all distractions so that they can get everything focused. It's like they're putting together a puzzle in their mind and they need everyone to go away and they need everyone to be quiet while they put together this mental puzzle. Imagine you're putting together a 500-piece puzzle and someone just comes and knocks the table over and all the pieces go flying. That can be how it feels to be interrupted when you're an INFJ because you do have that focus and you're trying to put together this idea or concept or solution in your mind. And in order to do that at your best, you got to tune everything out. And when someone interrupts you, it just feels like they've taken all that mental work that you put into something and just like completely trashed it. And so interruptions often can evoke a very angry response from an INFJ or a very strained response where they're trying to hold back their irritation. Another thing that's very stressful for INFJs is excessive socializing. INFJs love people. They have a deep empathy for people. At the same time, they need a lot of alone time to be at their best. And so if they have to be around a lot of people for very long periods of time, they can burn out really quickly. It forces them to lean into their extroverted functions, which is good for them in spurts of time, but it's not good for an entire day. As an example, imagine you have an INFJ who has kids, and so they go to the park for a play date for their children, and then hours and hours have passed, the kids don't want to go home, and they're stuck talking to the other moms at the play date, and they find themselves feeling more and more tired, more and more drained. They aren't able to get into their thoughts. They're not able to access their insights or their ideas because they're just having to respond to their environment. They're having to respond to the other people's feelings. They're having to really engage in the outer world. And as introverts, their tolerance for that can run out after an hour or two. So excessive extroverting and socializing can really drain an INFJ and create a whole lot of stress for them. Another thing that creates a lot of stress for INFJs is conflict. INFJs are very empathic people. They're very considerate, gentle people. They do not like it when they have to deal with conflict situations between people. They often act as mediators or peacekeepers, but this does take a lot of their energy. Often they can see everyone's side in a situation, and this can make it difficult for them to try to address everything because they feel like they're just absorbing everyone's feelings in the situation, and they just get emotional overload and have to do a lot of emotional labor. Criticism can also be taken very hard for INFJs. They tend to have very high standards for themselves, and they tend to be more sensitive to criticism than, say, thinking types would be. They tend to be very hard on themselves, and then they tend to replay the criticism over and over again and their mistakes over and over again, trying to find the details they missed or ways that they can fix it, and it's just a really exhausting process for them. So the first thing INFJs do when they experience stress is they lean into their natural strength. So generally speaking, they're going to lean into introverted intuition. They're going to try to pull away from people and get alone and focus on insights that could help them. Focus on imagining a solution to a problem that they're dealing with. Focus on envisioning a better future where they're not dealing with these issues, something that they can dream about and work towards that will give them strength to deal with the issues they're currently dealing with today. They might start getting into rabbit holes of various theories that they're interested in, or intellectualizing the stress that they're going through, trying to rationalize it or find some kind of insight or meaning in it that they can use in the future. However, if stress just continues, say they can't get away from the stress, maybe they can't go away and be alone, they have to stay in a really like loud social setting, or if just stress spikes really hard, or it's just very chronic, then what can happen is they can wear out their dominant function, introverted intuition, because they're relying so heavily on it. And when that happens, then extroverted sensing, that inferior function tends to take over. And this is what's called having a grip response to stress. Grip stress is when a personality overuses their dominant function and then the inferior function takes the wheel. So an INFJ in the grip is still overwhelmed by that sensory data, but they become fixated on it and they lean into it. So they might become overwhelmed with analyzing data, with overloading their senses. They feel like the details around them demand and need all their attention. This can look like an INFJ stress cleaning their house for hours and getting every little nook and cranny perfectly clean. Every detail has to be right. It can look like an INFJ who normally likes really quiet, peaceful surroundings, going to a rock concert and dancing to the music and just like in this almost out of body experience. It can look like reorganizing the entire house, organizing files and materials and getting them just right. It can look like going for a run and just keeping running for a really long time, overloading and exhausting your body. It can look like overeating, binge eating, drinking too much, binge watching Netflix while eating cookies and crackers and every snack you can think of. It's all about sensory overload. When INFJs are in the grip, they stop looking like normal INFJs and they can look really out of control ESPs. Healthy extroverted sensing is very much about staying mindful and in tune with the present moment and reacting in a way that brings joy and fulfillment. It's about stopping and smelling the roses rather than rushing headlong down the path. But when INFJs are in the grip of extroverted sensing, it often looks like overindulging in the present moment. It looks like spending all your money on a big shopping spree and regretting it later, or speeding down the road when you would normally go the speed limit, or instead of eating one cookie, eating a whole box of cookies. Another way that the grip can show up is having a very reactive anger response to the world around you. You feel more emotionally aroused, more critical of others, might have these short-lived, furious blow-ups at people that are interrupting or you feel are pushing into your space. The INFJs, if stress is continuous, have a lot of muscle aches and pains. They aren't breathing normally. They experience IBS, headaches, exhaustion. So what do you do about it? How do you, as an INFJ, cope with stress in a way that doesn't get you into these grip reactions? Or how do you handle it if you're already in a grip response? One of the first things that you can do is focus on your breathing. So much of our stress and anxiety can be helped by the way we breathe. One technique that I really like is using what's called the 478 breathing method. This technique is really great for INFJs because it helps to shift you out of overthinking and obsessing on details around you to getting grounded and in touch with your body and calming your whole nervous system. Here's how you do it. First, you're going to inhale through your nose for 4 seconds. Then you're going to hold your breath for 7 seconds. Then you're going to exhale slowly and completely through your mouth for 8 seconds. You're going to repeat this cycle about 3 to 4 times. If you do this as an INFJ, it can help you to regulate your body, your nervous system, your heart rate, everything, so that you can then approach your stress in a calmer state and actually feel physically better. This also helps to focus your attention away from that distracting external stimulus, which can be so overwhelming when you're getting stressed out or such a problem when you're in a state of grip stress, and focus you in on grounding your body and becoming connected with your body and connected again with your mind, your body, an inner sense of calm. Another way to return to equilibrium is to get some time alone. This is extremely important, and also cut back on sensory stimulation. If for me, I'm an INTJ, so I have the same stress response. One thing that I can do is just go into a room, shut off the lights, bury my head in a pillow, put a blanket over me, and just be in darkness and focus on my breathing for I don't know how long, 10, 15, 5 minutes, however much I can get. And this process of just cutting out sensory stimulation and being in the quiet and tuning everything out can be really helpful for me, as well as for an INFJ personality type who has the same dominant inferior dynamic going on. So if you're an INFJ, first focus on your breathing, try to get your breathing under control, do that 478 technique. Second, make some time to be alone and to reduce sensory stimulation. 3, try to lighten your schedule. If you've got a lot going on and you're in a state of grip stress or really charged stress, just the act of canceling non-essential obligations can make you feel better. If there is some social obligation on the horizon that you've been stressing about, find a way to cancel that. If there is something that you can hand off or delegate, try to find a way to do that. Try to lighten your load until this period passes. Another thing that INFJs often find very helpful is talking to someone after they've had some respite, some time alone, talking to someone, and ideally someone who's not going to give them a lot of advice or suggestions. They really just need someone to listen, someone who can rephrase back what they're hearing and really just be there for them. Advice often tends to make things worse when they're really stressed. Maybe after the stress is passed, if you are talking with an INFJ or helping them, you can ask them if they'd like suggestions or if they're looking for solutions. But if they don't explicitly say they're looking for solutions, then I would definitely recommend not giving them a bunch of solutions. Just listen to them, affirm what they're going through, rephrase back what you're hearing so that they feel really heard and valued. So I hope this has been helpful. If you're an INFJ and you were helped by this video, please leave a comment and let me know. Or if you have a question, leave a comment and let me know. I would love to hear from you. If you would like to learn more about your INFJ personality type, you can always check out my ebook, which is called The INFJ Understanding the Mystic. You can also get a paperback copy through Amazon. I'll leave a link in the description. If you're not sure of your personality type or you would like to have a one-on-one conversation with me to understand your INFJ personality type, more in depth, then I do offer coaching sessions or type clarification sessions, and I will leave a link to that on my description as well. I would love to be able to talk to you one-on-one about that. And as always, like and subscribe for more videos like this, and I will see you next time. Bye, everyone.